It's a great pleasure and a great honor for me to be your guest today, even virtually. I know quite well your country. I've been several times, and also one of my books was translated in Slovenian during the time of the negotiations for enlargement. It's a pleasure for me also to speak about my profession, to speak about lobbying. I am a professional lobbyist since a very long time, nearly since 50 years, since half a century. I have had different types of positions. During half of my career, I have managed EU trade associations representing sectors. First, the European sugar industry, which was a very important sector at that time, number one in the world. And it was, of course, very important to have a very efficient lobbying structure in the context of the EU-round negotiation for the WTO and also the successive reform of a common agricultural policy. Then after I became Secretary General of COPA-COGECA, representing the All Farmers Union in Europe. Then after I became a consultant, so working for private interests, if you wish, mostly industries and big companies. In parallel with my career, I have been also, and I'm still, a professor in many universities and a business school in the US during a long time at Georgetown, which is the mecca of American public affairs, also at Harvard, and in Europe in several universities, presently at the College of Europe in Bruges and in Nathalie. I am also an author. I have published several books, even many books, regarding the functioning of the European Union and also about lobbying and the ways that lobbying is evolving along the successive reform of the EU and the way to be influential within the institutions. This presentation of me is already a signal that to be a lobbyist is something a bit complex. It is a technical and a sophisticated job. It is true that the image of my profession is not good. It is considered by the public opinion as something opaque, with a lot of money in the decision-making processes, a sector with manipulation, why not corruption? And corruption, by the way, is the exact opposite of what you have to do if you want to be an influential lobbyist. But the image is like that. And we are very responsible of the situation because we have been unable to communicate about our profession. And also we have been unable to push for a regulation of our profession. I am very favorable to a regulation of the profession of lobbyist and a representative of interest. It is clear also that this profession is growing in complexity and technicality. In the good old days, to be a lobbyist was relatively simple. You had to be a specialist in something and to identify who was doing what at the commission mostly, and then you were organizing meeting and you were a lobbyist somewhere. Now it's much more difficult and much more different, you know. Now everything is complex and we have to manage three skills in parallel. First of all, we have to be a technician. We have to be a specialist of something. You need to know about agriculture or about energy or about environment. So the first asset is to be credible, technically speaking. But on top of that, you have to add a procedural understanding, how the dossiers are organized, who is deciding what about the parliament, what about the council of ministers, what about the commission, what about impact assessment, what about consultation. So it's very, very complex and difficult with many cases and exceptions, derogations. So you need to know that very well. And finally, you need to be a good communicator because you have the social networks, and the more a dossier is complex, the more you have to keep it simple. So you see, it's a job which is complex, but which is very useful and important because lobbying is a counterpower. Well, lobbying is part of the decision-making process, and lobbying is recognized by the institutions, by the commission, by the parliament, by the council. any draft regulation, any draft law is submitted for opinion and discussion to the lobbies, either established lobbyists or lobbying structures like EU trade associations or consultants like me when we represent clients. So we are part of the decision-making process and we bring our expertise and we try to be solution makers. Here also we have different categories of lobbyists. Some are representing the civil society, non-governmental organizations. They pretend they represent the general interests of the EU, and some others, like me, are representing industry. So sometimes it's difficult to work together. Everyone is pushing for his own interest. And the conclusion of all that is that influence in Brussels is based on excellence and not on money. So the key criteria to be influential in Brussels is not to have big budget and big resources. The most important is to be credible and to have the art of the job. To conclude on this short presentation, I think it's a good idea for you to regulate lobbying. In Brussels, everyone can establish himself or herself as a professional lobbyist, and I think this is a mistake. We have to take some inspiration from the US, where they have a disclosure act. The lobbyists are regulated, this is fine. If you want to be a doctor, you need to have a certificate. If you want to be a journalist either or a nurse, and here this is not the case. So really, I think that we need to build something light, not too administrative, but never mind with some rules and guidelines, because in our profession, we have sometimes some gray zones and we have to get rid of them in order to know precisely what is possible, what is not possible, and to have a sort of code of conduct which will be very precise and built in agreement between our profession and the representative of the institutions. I was very pleased to talk to you, even virtually. I will be even more pleased to visit you if you wish during springtime, why not, and to continue this discussion. So very welcome to continue this conversation and to enter much more in detail. I wish you a very good success for your conversation and more generally, all the best and see you soon, I hope. Thank you very much.